Hello and welcome to the Daily Space. My name is Dr. Pamela Gay, and most weekdays, the CosmoQuest team is here putting science in your brain. Today, however, is for Rocket Roundups. Let's get to it, shall we? April 29th was a super busy day for spaceflight fans, with 3 launches occurring in just over 100 minutes. That's 3 launches in less than 2 hours. First up, at 0150 UTC, Arianespace's Vega rocket lifted off from a pad in Kourou, French Guiana for VV-18. Let's watch that launch.
À tous de DDO, attention pour les décomptes finales. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, unité, top. Allumage P80 et décollage de V18.
This was Vega's return to flight mission after the failures of flights 15 and 17. And no, we didn't skip a mission. Vega Flight 16 was successful. It just had the misfortune of being squished between 2 not-so-nominal launches. For a bit of history, Flight 15 failed in July 2019 due to a structural problem with the second stage. And Flight 17 failed in November 2020 because, and I can't make this up, someone reversed cables on the 4th stage's guidance system, resulting in the opposite of the intended maneuvers and the rocket spinning out of control. Now that I've talked to you about the reasons why this launch had a few people on edge, let's focus on the payloads. For this flight, everything was perfectly nominal, and Pleiades Neo 3, the primary spacecraft, was successfully inserted into orbit just under an hour after launch. After 2 more burns that took 101 minutes, 5 additional CubeSats separated from the 4th stage. Pleiades Neo 3 is the first of a constellation of high-resolution commercial imaging spacecraft. When the full constellation of 4 spacecraft is on orbit, it will allow for images to be taken of the same site twice a day, and the company will support requests for images to be processed 30 minutes after acquisition. The 5 CubeSat payloads include 2 AIS ship tracking satellites for Spire, a spectrum survey satellite for Aurora Insight, a satellite for the Norwegian Space Agency, and an Internet of Things satellite for Eutelsat. Did we mention that this is just launch 1 of 3 that got crammed into 100 minutes of space launch success? After the break, we're going to go in detail on Launch 2, the launch of the first module of China's new space station. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. The next launch in the triple header was a big deal. On March 29th at 0323 UTC, China launched a Long March 5B carrying the core module for the China space station from the Wenchang Satellite Launch Center on China's Hainan Island. This high-profile launch was broadcast live in real time online by China Central Television, the state television network. Before we get into all the details, let's watch the launch. This was only the second launch for the Long March 5B. It first launched about a year ago. It's a bit different from the Long March 5. By omitting the second stage from the Long March 5, the Long March 5B can launch really massive objects into low Earth orbit, but no further. This also makes it a 1.5 stage rocket, like the Atlas rocket that launched the Mercury capsules into orbit back in the 1960s. Both the rocket core and boosters are ignited on the ground, and the boosters are jettisoned when they have used up their propellant. The rocket core stage goes all the way into orbit with that payload. The core module is named Tianjie, which literally translates to Harmony of the Heavens. The module is massive, weighing 22.5 metric tons, or 11,252 liter soda bottles worth of mass. And it completely filled the cavernous fairings of the Long March 5B. The space inside the fairing is 20.5 meters long and 5.2 meters wide. Our team thinks you can fit 4 school buses inside. Tianjie itself looks externally like a mere core module with International Space Station style solar panels on the side. China's entire space program is heavily influenced by Russia's space program. The Chinese crewed spacecraft is essentially an adaptation of the Soyuz, and their previous space stations were similar to the Soviet era Salyut stations. On the inside, the station is laid out reminiscent of the International Space Station modules, with a clearly defined bottom and top, and lockers on the sides. To be fair, there are only so many ways to build a space station, so they do all kind of end up looking the same. The Chinese station has 2 axial docking ports, one on each end, and 4 radial docking ports in a hub on the narrow end of the module. The docking ports resemble the International Space Station's International Docking System standard ports. These are just technical specifications that are freely available online for anyone to download. So you too can download a copy and build your own International Docking System port if you want. Tianjie, the Chinese crewed spacecraft, have docked to ports like this one on previous Chinese space stations, the Tiangong 1 and 2. There is also an airlock for spacewalks in the core module. China has an ambitious schedule of future crew resupply and additional module launches for the next 18 months to fully outfit the station and populate it. The first of these is the Tianzhou 2 resupply spacecraft in May, followed by the crewed Shenzhou 12 mission later in June. 2 other laboratory cabin modules named Wen-Ti and Mong-Ti-An will be launched on future Long March 5B in 2022. We'll have reports for these launches after they occur. One more note on this launch. According to Chinese sources, the core stage was supposed to conduct a deorbit burn to hasten its return to Earth. This would have been accomplished by venting excess propellants at just the right time and direction to slow down its orbit. As the core stage was still being tracked in its insertion orbit many hours after launch, the deorbit burn apparently did not happen. The core stage will have an uncontrolled re-entry somewhere between 41 degrees north and 41 degrees south latitude, based on the inclination of the orbit. And this will occur sometime in the next few days or weeks. This will be a major event when it occurs. The Long March 5B core stage missed re-entering over New York City by about 2 minutes of predicted re-entry time. That core stage ended up re-entering over the Pacific Ocean just off the Ivory Coast and showering a village with debris. As of May 4th, this latest core stage was expected to re-enter on May 9th around 0437 UTC, give or take about a day. So basically, anywhere on Earth, sometime next week. After the break, we will be back with the third of this trio of launches and an additional mission. Stay tuned. Finally, for the last launch of this triple header, we bring you SpaceX. On April 29th at 0344 UTC, SpaceX launched a Falcon 9 from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. This was launched with booster 1060, and it took another 60 Starlink satellites to orbit for the Starlink L-24 mission. This marks 1,505 Starlink version 1 satellites launched. So the first shell of the Starlink constellation is now complete. Let's take a look at the launch.
Stage 1 press for flight.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Falcon 9 is configured for flight.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff. Godspeed, Apollo 11 microfinal Collins. May the pursuit of exploration live on.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
For those of you keeping score at home, this was the 7th mission for this particular booster, and both of the fairings were reused. Booster 1060 successfully landed on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. And both fairings were recovered from the water and returned to port. For our last launch of the week, on April 30th at 0725 UTC, China launched another rocket, this time a Long March 4C rocket from the Tianjie Satellite Launch Center in northwestern China. On board was the Yaogan 34 mission. This was the first of a new series of remote sensing satellites, likely for military applications, as the generic name Yaogan translates to remote observing. The purpose of this specific Yaogan satellite was described as an optical remote sensing satellite, mainly used in territorial survey, urban planning, land right confirmation, road network design, crop yield estimation, disaster prevention, and mitigation, and other fields. This rocket is going to be a little bit busy. Finally, on May 2nd at 0237 UTC, Crew Dragon Resilience undocked from the International Space Station after 169 days in space. On board were Expedition 64 Crew 1 astronauts Michael Hopkins, Victor Glover, Soichi Noguchi, and Shannon Walker. Originally scheduled for April 28th, the undocking was pushed back several days due to bad weather in the recovery zone in the Gulf of Mexico just off the coast of the Florida Panhandle. On May 2nd, the undocking minus 6 hours weather briefing was good, and the crew suited up and boarded the capsule. Once the hooks on the SpaceX docking system were driven out, Crew Dragon Resilience performed a burn with its Draco thrusters to begin moving away from the docking port. Because the capsule departed during orbital night, each of the thruster burns was clearly visible on the NASA webcast. Once the Crew Dragon was safely away from the International Space Station, it performed 3 more burns, using all of its thrusters to increase the rate of departure from the International Space Station. Then Resilience spent the next few orbits 10 kilometers below the International Space Station, preparing for the deorbit burn. This burn lasted 16 minutes and 23 seconds and set the capsule up for a precision landing just off the coast of Panama City, Florida. This image from the European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet, which is available on our website, dailyspace.org, was taken from the International Space Station. And the image shows the bright streak of Resilience re-entering the atmosphere in the Gulf of Mexico. Yes, folks, an astronaut caught an image of a capsule returning to Earth and lighting up the night. The NASA webcast used the infrared camera on a WB-57 aircraft to track the capsule through entry, drogue chute deploy, and main chute deploy. But it showed the trail of the capsule through re-entry all the way down to splashdown. Splashdown happened at 07:56 UTC, which was what some would call early morning and others would call middle of the night local time. Crew Dragon Resilience was quickly lifted out of the water in the pitch darkness and hoisted onto the deck of Go Navigator, the primary recovery vessel. First, a small boat headed to the capsule, and a specially trained crew member climbed on top of the just landed capsule and attached a lift harness. Right before the capsule was lifted out of the water, the specialist jumped into the water and was picked up by the small boat. This was the first night recovery of an American crewed spacecraft since the recovery of Apollo 8 in 1968. The 4 astronauts, Noguchi, Walker, Glover, and Hopkins, were all smiles and thumbs up after they disembarked the capsule. After a medical check in Go Navigator's onboard clinic, the crew members boarded a helicopter and were flown back to NASA Houston. Go Navigator and the capsule took the long way around the tip of Florida to Port Canaveral's Poseidon Wharf. Because the Crew Dragon is still loaded with hazardous hypergolic fluid used in its Draco and Super Draco thrusters, the capsule is being taken to Poseidon Wharf rather than the usual North Cargo Pier, as Poseidon is more isolated in case anything goes wrong. Once unloaded from Go Navigator, Resilience will be taken to the Crew Dragon processing facility at Area 58 on Cape Canaveral Space Force Station to offload the hypergolic fuel and undergo further processing and preparation for its next trip to space. The capsule's next flight is already penciled in for no earlier than September 2021 on the Inspiration 4 mission, which will be the first all-civilian space mission. After the break, we will be back with no more launches. That was enough. Instead, we're going to bring you this week's space stats and a fact I am sure you will enjoy. Stay tuned. To wrap things up, here's a running tally of a few spaceflight statistics for the current year. The number of space toilets remains steady, as the addition of the Chinese space station's toilet was offset when Crew 1 returned to Earth. Toilets currently in space? 6. 3 installed on the International Space Station, 1 on Crew Dragon, 1 on Soyuz, and 1 on Tianjie. Total 2021 orbital launch attempts, 38, including 1 failure. Total satellites from launches, 924. We keep track of orbital launches by where they launched from, also known as spaceport. Here's that breakdown. USA 14, China 10, Kazakhstan 4, Russia 3, New Zealand 2, French Guiana 1, India 1. Your random space fact for this week is that NASA engineer Judith Love Cohen worked on an engineering problem for one of the Apollo missions while she was in labor with her son, actor Jack Black. That's it. That's all we've got for today. This has been The Daily Space.